distinguished guests, dear friends, good evening, everyone. In today's modern era, the cultural exchanges are becoming more and more increasingly frequent and in-depth. How to communicate with different nationalities and cultures, exchange and integration. It is a topic that we, as people of our time, all need to reflect on. Today's guest speaker for today, the esteemed Khenpo Sodargye Rinpoche, is precisely a model in this regard. Although Khenpo Rinpoche is a great and revered Tibetan Buddhist master, for nearly 30 years, he has been guiding disciples of the Fourfold Assembly, Han Chinese. He knows the preferences and habits of the Han people well. Khenpo believes different ethnic groups, although in terms of customs, culture, and concepts, there are indeed many differences. The teachings of Buddhism are all embracing, completely transcending ethnic differences. Many friends present here today come from different ethnic groups and different countries, speak different languages, and have different backgrounds growing up. Yet we all live on this truly beautiful land of France. Therefore, each of us perhaps should reflect on such a question. For yourself and others, bring more benefits and happiness. How can we, while maintaining our own traditions, actively and successfully integrate into a diverse cultural environment? Now, let us invite the esteemed Khenpo Sodargye Rinpoche discuss this issue with us.
It was about 20 years ago, in the autumn of 1993, that I came to Paris together with His Holiness, the revered spiritual teacher, Jigme Phuntsok. At that time, we didn't stay in Paris for long, and then we went to Sogyal Rinpoche's center in Montpellier. That city, the one we visited, the one that we talked about, at his spiritual retreat center, L'Era Bling, located in the south of France, where we stayed there for approximately 10 days. After finishing our activities, we made our way back to Paris, then preparing for our next journey. Once we were ready, we headed to the Hong Kong. More than 20 years later, when I came here again, on the one hand, I really missed the guru from back then, because he has already left this world and is no longer with us. Over 20 years later, I have come here again, and in general, it seems that the overall appearance and architecture of Paris as a city haven't really changed much. They're really basically the same as before. It's still a very, truly, absolutely charming city indeed. But whether the inner culture has changed, I'm not entirely sure. But one thing is quite obvious. Back then, not as many people were really like they are now, with everyone carrying an iPhone there. Was nothing like that. At that time, many of the wealthier, more affluent people used what was commonly called a big brother phone, those really large ones. It seemed that many French people back then carried those in their hands. But drinking coffee and many young people holding a cigarette in their hands, that also left a deep impression on me at the time. Actually, about the external architecture, the preservation across all of Europe is remarkably, exceptionally good. Hundreds of years, spanning long periods, even many centuries old. Just like the famous Notre Dame Cathedral we visited yesterday, the origins of that structure actually go all the way back to the year 1163. That's the date it was first established. If my memory serves me right. Indeed, from an Eastern perspective, it's quite rare to see such well-preserved architecture. What I care about is that ultimately external architecture truly and authentically represents and reflects a culture, and how we think as people also needs both traditional and modern cultural elements from both worlds. But when we consider the question of whether people from Western countries truly possess this quality, such a absolutely and remarkably complete preservation of their original traditional culture in every sense. I asked experts before. Some say no, that after World War II it was lost. Others say it's still well preserved. In any case, nowadays, Eastern and Western cultures are undeniably in an era of deep integration, cultural blending, and also people from the East and the West are actively interacting with each other and sometimes even living together. It's really this kind of special so-called global village, so-called globalization and internationalization. It truly has in many ways really become this kind of way of life. Everyone here already knows the so-called East and West. The East refers to Indian culture, Chinese culture, as well as the cultures of Arabia and Israel, including the cultures of North Africa. The so-called Western culture refers to the cultures of Europe, South America, North America, as well as Oceania's cultures. People call Western culture, Eastern culture, and Western culture. There are indeed many differences and distinctions. In fact, in some areas, there are quite a lot of conflicts and contradictions. Unaware of the differences between Eastern and Western cultures, it's possible that many disagreements will also arise between people. Some scholars hold the view that the unique qualities and deep-rooted traditions of our Eastern culture have had a profound influence on shaping our society. Can be called a so-called land farmer culture because when human civilization first began to rise, for generations many dedicated farmers patiently cultivated the land continuously from spring to autumn, waiting year after year in endless cycles. So its culture embodies a concept of long-term vision and continuity. In contrast, Western culture is essentially a maritime fisherman culture. That is to say, after a fisherman finishes fishing, the task is complete. So many things have a creative aspect, and Western culture values creativity. But once a task is finally finished, it's simply done, and there isn't much focus on sustainability or follow-up. No matter what the case is, in reality, as we know, Eastern and Western approaches to ways of thinking, each distinct in their own right. There are many differences, and even in their everyday lifestyles. Their historical and cultural backgrounds also differ greatly. Many people say that when Chinese people greet each other, they ask, "Hey, have you eaten yet by any chance?" The French ask, "Where do you live?" The British usually ask, "How's the weather today?" Many people say this, whether it's true or not. I'm not entirely sure myself, honestly. Is it really like this? Today, you all come from different countries. When you greet people, has this happened to you? But I think there are some areas where the differences are significant. For example, Eastern people tend to be more emotional. Sometimes they can get really, really excited or even very, very happy. Even among our Buddhists, sometimes people can get extremely emotional, but Westerners are more rational. They can also be more indifferent, and gradually they might wonder why he laughs, why he cries, why is it this way? There's so many whys. Many Eastern people tend to care a lot about certain things in particular, what their parents say, what their ancestors have said for many generations, what their leaders say, and what the government says. There is a strong emphasis on tradition and inheritance from above. But Westerners, whether it's with their parents or teachers, or with their president. I've heard that some preschoolers, children who haven't started first grade, are ready to express dissatisfaction with their president. He wants to give him advice. So Westerners tend to be generally more free and often open-minded. Many examples include situations where, for example, if a French person and Chinese person live together, the French person might think that their own traditions are correct, while the Chinese person believes that their own ideas and philosophies are right. A lot of the debates between them often frequently stem from differences in national backgrounds and individualistic thinking, and there are certain clear differences between them. In fact, when it comes to these kinds of differences, the very first thing we should do is to genuinely understand the other person's habits and their way of thinking. This is very important. Other person's way of thinking is actually related to their upbringing and education. For example, Chinese people are taught from a young age that you must always be filial to your parents. When you grow up, you should always take care of your parents. It is important that you pay attention to and listen carefully to the advice, guidance, and instructions given by adults. But in the West, for many people, starting from the age of 18, they may not receive this kind of education. So at the most fundamental level, the Western style of education is very different from the Eastern style of education. Everyone knows, regarding education, the West emphasizes an education centered on individualism, as well as, in particular, nationalism. More importantly, there is a focus on scientism. People are expected to be creative. You can't really be raised in a way that just molds everyone exactly the same way. Children are encouraged from a young age to develop their own skills and intelligence. This is a hallmark of Western education. Within this kind of education, such as in this educational system, one develops a sense of individuality and self-confidence. You have your own self-trust, individuality, and strength. When you speak about your own merits, many Western children are very confident. I think I have something, but when you tell many Eastern children, you are very wise, he thinks that I'm not wise at all. They feel very embarrassed. In fact, for Eastern people, this is not arrogance, but humility. It's considered a virtue. But for Westerners, they might wonder, was my compliment wrong? You really are wise, I believe. But if you don't even acknowledge it, it's almost like an insult to me. I've encountered this. Maybe Westerners don't agree, don't admit it. When it's time for questions, you can debate with me. What I meant is this is the Western way of thinking. I've heard it's like this, but maybe it's not. If you Westerners don't agree, debate with me. Not everyone should debate me, or I can't win. Actually, this Western way of thinking in particular has great potential for development because you can actually think for yourself independently. Even teachers aren't always right. National leaders aren't always right. Parents aren't always right. At certain times, the viewpoints I create through my imagination, the created opinions are reasonable. So we need to cultivate this kind of creativity together, or rather this kind of spirit. That's right. I think there's a Canadian teacher I know, someone I've met and spoken with on a few occasions, and who has always stood out to me for their friendly and approachable manner, who said that many children from the East tend to be more obedient no matter what. If you come in through the back door, you come in through the back every day. If you come in through the front door, then you always use the front door. This definitely feels more comfortable. But when it comes to doing homework, they write down what the teacher says. They really don't think much beyond that. Westerners, on the other hand, tend to dislike it. If you tell them, come in through back door, some of them wonder why. If there's a front door clearly, why must I come in from back? So they think I should just come in through the front door. And they do. At that point, they feel rather annoyed. But later, when it comes to doing homework, many people write something in their daily lives. One is cultural difference, and another is our thinking. which needs to be integrated. We are aware of many such differences. In fact, when we see others doing something wrong, very often we ourselves can be tolerant. We can forgive. This is what we call Buddhism, key wisdom of Buddhism. Although this timeless and profound Buddhist wisdom originally originates from the East, I believe that if it is applied in the lives of Westerners, it can bring them tremendous benefit and help. If it is present in the thinking or lives of Easterners, then Easterners also live very fulfilling and happy lives. I personally have been for more than 30 years continuously studying Buddhist teachings. It's not because I'm a Buddhist that I deliberately praise it, but I've always firmly believed that Buddhist wisdom, one is from a theoretical perspective, is extremely convincing. Secondly, regardless of whether in the East or the West, no matter what kind of person you are, in terms of your life, it can cause a significant psychological change because most of the suffering in our human world, some of it comes from anger, at times from not understanding others, including conflicts within family members, the Cold Wars and hot wars between family members. Not sure whether the French have this expression, Cold War and hot war. A cold war, people don't talk long for 2, 3, or 4 days. Sometimes after a while, you have no choice but to talk. Sometimes though you don't want to speak, but you can always send a message on WeChat and say a word or two, or send a text message, just a line or two. Yes, no, I suppose it's something more or less like that. This is caused by our anger and resentment. Another kind of suffering often comes from desire, from longing, and from greed. You might not have something, but you really want to get it. For example, you really want to be with someone who is especially truly attractive and genuinely beautiful. Or maybe you feel you are very unattractive, but you really wanted someone who looks just like a heavenly maiden or a celestial being. This too is a kind of suffering. In the past, I met many Chinese friends, and they were all especially envious of Paris. They would say this is an incredibly romantic and truly beautiful country and city. It's as if once you've been to Paris, France, you feel like you've already gone to heaven. One day I asked someone living in France, I said, for those of you who live out there in Paris, do you ever sometimes feel this way? When this person answered me, he said that the word romantic does indeed sound very nice. But in reality, you see, here he witnessed before two people are enjoying a pleasant meal together while sitting side by side on a boat as it gently floats along the scenic Sena River. It seemed that, as it turned out, the husband apparently didn't actually manage to bring any money, and the wife, on her part, was simply not willing to lend him any at all. He ended up having to ask other friends for help. He said, Khenpo, if you saw a scene like this yourself, not romantic, no matter who we are as individuals or as a group when we're actually here, we might not necessarily feel it's so wonderful, but from the perspective of someone from another world, it seems incredibly joyful here. For example, I've actually been to Australia and also to Canada before. Generally, we Asians think that once you get there, people are just extremely happy. But when I actually went there myself, they would say, wow, the blue skies and white clouds of the Tibetan plateau, how wonderful. I've never been to Tibet, and I really want to go once. My lifelong wish is to truly visit Tibet at least once. Many Tibetans often think, oh, this time when I go, many of us Tibetans, our wish this time is definitely to go to Chengdu. Very few people have been to Paris, but many people, a Tibetan friend once told me, I've heard Chengdu is wonderful. In my lifetime, I must go to Chengdu. I don't know about those of you sitting here. Actually, many French people, basically, they are locals, but they probably also have many different kinds of yearnings for countries they haven't yet visited and people they haven't ever met. a culture that has never ever been tried before. Many Han people and Tibetans, I see that today, many Tibetans have also come here. They might feel that, for example, after arriving here, when it comes to the culture of the French people here, their language and many of their daily habits, it's time to truly integrate at this moment. We all need mutual learning and understanding from both sides. Some people feel that when they go to an unfamiliar place, they just can't accept the local culture here, including some international students. For example, they always eat what they're really used to eating. Like some Chinese students who go abroad looking for delicious Chinese restaurants every day, only speaking their own language, not learning any other languages, and unwilling to communicate with others. As a result, you might not even be able to find a job, and in the end, you leave dejectedly and go back home. So, adapting to new environments, interacting with others must be strong. If you don't have these strengths, you shouldn't go abroad. And also, not to live together with people from different ethnic groups. Some people are always complaining about others. This person just doesn't really go along with me. The customs here are strange. It's not like this back home. They look at things with a very complaining, resentful attitude. But actually, this is unreasonable. For example, some people from the East live in France. You shouldn't complain about them because you originally had the freedom to choose. It's not like the refugees this time who were sent over here. You chose this place after all, didn't you? Since you chose this person, since you chose this place, since you chose this environment, you should also bravely adapt yourself to the local way of life and these circumstances in their daily routines. Otherwise, it's probably impossible for the world to revolve around you. As for the French, I've heard there are now 600,000 Chinese people here. While there are 60 million French people, those 60 million people simply can't change their lives just for you. So since you've chosen to be here, you should adapt yourself to their way of life and can adjust. When I was at Laronga, at the Buddhist Academy, many Han Chinese came to our Tibetan region to study, but a lot of them would complain, saying that we Tibetans do in fact drink butter tea, which tastes really bad and smells quite unusual or odd, and so on, making it rather unpleasant overall. I always say that if this is the case, many Tibetans' food are not good. You shouldn't have come here. So whenever I go to another country or among another ethnic group, I make a real effort to eat their food, though it tastes unpleasant. I think since I've come here, I must eat what they eat. For example, when I went to France, I tried my best to eat French cuisine. In the Netherlands, I ate Dutch food often. When I went to Italy, I made an effort to eat Italian pasta and pizza. Of course, it's fine for us to focus on eating, but more importantly, I hope that you all can use some Buddhist wisdom and a tolerant mindset to accept things. This requires learning in order to accept it. Of course, for those of you who don't have a faith, I won't force you. But I think that, in my opinion, many young Chinese people, especially those in urban areas, possibly going to these places to teach Buddhism in English, they may not be able to actually obtain them. In the Han and Tibetan regions of China, which are well-known and notably culturally significant areas, if those Buddhist teachings and transmissions are also unavailable, in this case, I feel that you lack nourishment for your mind, and without spiritual nourishment, that is truly, genuinely a pity. The most important thing for a person, it's not the external culture and external clothes that are important. One must possess a kind of inner wisdom and faith. This is extremely important for everyone. As for systematic study of Buddhism, I recommend that today, as we talk about the idea of tolerance, there is a treatise called The Way of the Bodhisattva, Bodhicharyavatara. I have taught it before, and many of you here are really studying it. Today, I truly hope that you will study once again. For those who truly wish to understand the Buddhist concept of tolerance, you should study the way of the Bodhisattva very diligently at least once. After doing so, your behavior will undergo a significant transformation. Such study, especially for many of you from France and other countries, I believe that systematic listening, contemplation, and practice are indeed very important. If these important ideas are not studied thoroughly and carefully, then problems may arise. Including those from some Western religions, I notice there are many Christian churches, but if some of the certain teachings of Christianity, in fact, are not truly passed down with wisdom from generation to generation, perhaps some elderly people are praying inside. But the true essence, the very core and foundation of Christian thought, many people today are unable to explain. If the theories and ideas of Christianity not learning well at all, and there are only some churches with some elderly people praying there, this alone is not necessarily very important. More important is that the religious philosophy of Christianity, future generations, for youth, they must fully and clearly understand its doctrines. Sometimes I ask many young people, some young people who are Christians, and they can't really explain how exactly God exists. After people die, it's either going to heaven or going to hell. But after that, are they really there forever? Or what happens next? Are these really the only two paths for everyone? Many people don't explain this. Actually, after giving it some careful thought, I truly believe that the genuine and original doctrines of Christianity, those may have many different interpretations. Similarly, here in China, there are a lot of people burning incense and worshipping Buddha in many temples. But if you ask specifically about the core teachings and principles of Buddhism, for example, what was the life of Shakyamuni Buddha like? What changes do we Buddhists experience after practicing? What transformations happen to ourselves? How can past and future lives exist? And other such questions Buddhists are unable to answer. By comparison, in our Tibetan Buddhism, the teachings from more than 2,500 years ago, wisdom that has endured through the centuries, have been continuously passed down without interruption. Just like architectural styles in Europe. The architectural style has not changed. If you don't quite believe it, you can certainly go and, if you wish, take your time to learn more about it. In this way, there is a kind of religious philosophy that can restrain people, as I mentioned earlier. When we are greedy, we feel uncomfortable, excessive anger, negative emotions, making us feel uneasy. These negative emotions, through Buddhist teachings, especially ideas in Tibetan Buddhism, can be resolved. So sometimes I have this feeling that sometimes comes over me, that no matter which country, in the East or the West, it is absolutely essential to note that one must understand the importance of meaningful tolerance. If you possess a tolerant mindset, then whether you are in a Western country or an Eastern country, if you meet Easterners or Westerners, no matter what kind of person you are or what environment you're in, you can live happily and warmly. Therefore, I hope that today, most people from the East, your traditional ideas that are meaningful to society and individuals, do not forget them. Even if you haven't learned them before, perhaps after learning, your life will truly see unhappy emotions turn into happiness. Of course, there is a lot of room for this. In fact, our minds can be very broad. The human mind, in its vast capacity, can be broader than the sky and wider than the ocean. But if a person's mind is, in fact, very narrow, restricted, and quite limited in its scope, many apartments in Paris are very small, but I feel the apartments are very spacious. If our mind's expansive, even the smallest apartment will feel spacious to you. But if your mind is narrow, limited, or closed off, the biggest apartment is painful. In short, each of us all should not forget our own traditional virtues and the foundation of our traditional culture. At the same time, we must seek to understand the rich multicultural world around us. We should also learn to gradually integrate ourselves into this world because we are all members of this world. At first, we might think that others are not attractive, but as time goes by little, others are attractive. So life can always find a way to blend together. When I started drinking coffee, I wasn't used to it. I even thought that people who liked coffee so much must have something wrong with them mentally. But now, after drinking coffee myself, I find it pleasant and romantic. You can't drink too much of it, otherwise it's bad for the stomach. It seems like I see French people drinking a lot of coffee every day. If I lived in Paris, for example, maybe I would also drink coffee many times throughout the day. I'm not used to it. Actually, it takes some time to get used to any kind of life. Once you reach a certain point, you start to find everything beautiful and meaningful. The key is yourself. Thank you, everyone.